France, under the Third Republic, was still surrounded by empires and monarchies. So any entertaining the state did had to be absolutely splendid.
The palace reached a saturation point very quickly.
Initially, they used the salons and the great salon on the first floor, hosting lots of balls. But there were so many that it completely shook up the structure of the floor. There was a lot of traffic.
The Élysée was not suitable for representing France and this ambitious new republic that wanted to impose itself on the international scene. And with the centenary of the Revolution and the World's Fair both coming up in 1889, it had to be up to the challenge. President Sadi Carnot launched a major construction project for the palace. He wanted to create a sumptuous reception room worthy of the greatest European monarchies.
All our leaders have always had this hang-up about Versailles and the Louvre, unwilling to give up on the effect of great classical stone architecture. But at the same time, they needed a framework from which to be able to construct quickly, and the benefits of iron were very tempting.
The Eiffel Tower had just been completed in this innovative material and was the standard bearer. The new ballroom was going to be 36 meters long, 24 meters wide, and 14 meters high, with a metal frame. The walls would be made from brick. This approach would ensure the building could be up in under 6 months. But most of all, it would result in a volume hitherto unseen.
A ballroom of this size could only exist with a metal structure, because the columns are very thin, very high, and very light, and they could be decorated. This frees up the floor and the roof from everything they had to use before, namely pillars. So it was wonderful.
The ceilings were covered in the colors of the Republic: blue, white, and red. For the first time at the Élysée Palace, the Republic imposed its architecture through state-of-the-art technology.
The ballroom was symbolic of France's industrial influence and what it was capable of. But you couldn't see that from the outside. You had to go inside the ballroom and look up at the ceiling to see the abundance and richness of this fledgling industrial France of the 19th century.
In the ceilings, there were also outlets for hot air and smoke, because it was all lit with gas. There were many wonderful chandeliers, and all of that had to be evacuated. So there are ventilation grills hidden within the ornate decoration, which is in fact hiding a whole system.
Sadi Carnot had no intention of stopping there. To welcome his guests, he commissioned an imposing glass and steel structure in the courtyard to house the cloakrooms required for hosting such events.
Here, there was a conservatory-like structure with a metal frame and glass that occupied virtually the entire width and the entire height of the first floor.
This unfortunate construction made the main facade overlooking the courtyard very ugly indeed, especially as it was constructed in glass, so you could see the servants and visitors from the palace inside. It ended up with it being rather rudely nicknamed the monkey cage.
For the Élysée, the new century opened with a period of stagnation. The palace took on the appearance of a bourgeois house where boredom had settled in for a long stretch. In 1940, after the fall of France, President Albert Lebrun left behind an empty palace that the German occupying forces did not wish to use. And as if to draw a line under the end of the Third Republic, the monkey cage was demolished in 1947. It would take almost a decade for power to finally return to the Élysée. In the cold winter of 1959, a car escorted by gendarmes headed for 55 Rue de Faubourg Saint-Honoré. It was carrying Charles de Gaulle, hero of the Second World War, who was about to become the first president of the brand new Fifth Republic. A regime under which he would be the head of the armed forces and of the executive branch, the most powerful man in the country.
January 8th, 1959 was when political power definitively returned to the Élysée.
De Gaulle himself said, "Did anyone think I would take the helm just to be a ribbon cutter?" This time, we had a kind of Republican monarch, and that was de Gaulle.
A Republican monarch who, as dictated by tradition, must take up residence in the former Évreux mansion.
He hated the Élysée, this former mansion that was now squashed within the city. He couldn't breathe there. It was not a place from which to exercise power. De Gaulle wanted symbols and an expansive view.
De Gaulle suggested moving the presidency to the Château de Vincennes or Les Invalides, places that, in his opinion, better embodied this new presidential power.
When he suggested Vincennes, they said, "But General, Vincennes is too expensive. The École Militaire would be too difficult. Don't even think about Les Invalides." The Élysée was the only choice.
The general had to make the best of a bad job, and as such, the Évreux mansion had to bend to his will. Like a true military leader, he embarked upon an in-depth reorganization of the palace. Until then, it had been a ceremonial residence, but now the Élysée Palace was to become the nation's command center.
De Gaulle arrived. He needed teams, civil, military, and foreign affairs.
There wasn't enough room. General de Gaulle's staff was 6 or 7 times bigger than that of his predecessor, René Coty. One of the first things de Gaulle did in '59, when he arrived, was to reclaim the entire first floor. Because until then, the first floor had been used solely to receive visiting foreign heads of state. When he was asked where they should be put, de Gaulle replied, "I don't want to be seeing kings in pajamas in my corridors."
On the first floor, under the eaves around the east and west courtyards, every last corner was transformed into a workspace. The palace turned into a gigantic anthill where 400 to 800 people were bustling around every day. Two townhouses at numbers 14 and 18 Rue de l'Élysée were purchased and converted into annexes. The general then set his sights on a strategic part of the palace, a salon located in the center of the building, namely the Salon Doré, or Gilded Salon.
This was the first time that a president of the Republic took up residence on the first floor in a very centralized way. It was a pretty obvious symbol. Everything started from there and converged to that point. They still refer to the General's office at the Élysée today.
Since Charles de Gaulle, every subsequent president of the Fifth Republic has taken up residence at the Élysée. Despite its shortcomings, this 18th century palace has established itself as the first residence in France, the hyperstructure of French power. Could France or the rest of the world now ever imagine the president living anywhere other than the Élysée, this gilded symbol of Republican pomp?